I live in the deep woods in southern Missouri. The nearest civilization outside our trailer house down the road is a gas station town a couple miles away. I've lived here since I was 6 months old and spent my days in the woods. I don't remember a time where I didn't know the winding paths and clearings like the back of my hand. There were always stories of something in the woods. A local tribesman told tale of a spirit that wandered the woods at night. I was deeply invested in stories of ghosts and monsters and that sort of stuff, so the tribesman's tale was pretty run-of-the-mill. I didn't think much of it until a few years ago. One night around 2010, I was walking the usual trail and got a feeling that something wasn't right. It was like I was walking 3 feet behind my body. It was the sound of a snapping branch that brought my body and mind back together. But it wasn't a twig or small limb. It was a large oak branch about as wide as me. It hit the ground with a hard thud. After that, the woods became completely silent. No owls or coyotes howling. Not even the night breeze. The only sound was my own stunned breathing. Out of the darkness, 2 glowing eyes looked directly at me from the shadows. They were several yards down the trail, yet still seemed several feet off the ground. A low, thundering growl came from that same direction. It was like the growl of a tiger mixed with a bear. I wanted to run back home, but my legs wouldn't budge. My breathing picked up and became more and more like gasping for air. The growling stopped as the creature started to turn around to go deeper into the woods, showing me its form in the moonlight. It didn't seem of this world. I can only describe it as a black mountain lion with the head and body size of a grizzly bear. It looked like it hadn't ate in a month. It was nothing more than skin and bones. Only when I was alone again in the woods would my legs let me sprint back home and lock myself in my room with a survival knife. Occasionally on the quietest nights of the year, I can hear it outside my window, and the same eyes from that night appear out of the darkness. I never go outside without my knife anymore, even during the day. I've had several friends that have come over for the day go home that night and tell me of how they feel like they're being watched from outside. So, I've always been open to paranormal things. I recall several things as a child, but the older I get, the less I see as adulthood and responsibilities have overtaken my ability to see things that I once did. I had a son in January of 2011. By 2013, when he was almost 2 years old, we moved out of my mother's house and into our own apartment. It was kind of a rushed ordeal, as my mother and I butt heads a lot, and as soon as I had the money, I went to the first available opening. The apartment manager had actually asked me to hold on for our extra 2 weeks because, as she said, some girls were moving to Florida and left the place a mess and it needed cleaning up. She never asked for a credit check, any references, or anything. It was just an, okay, I'll let you know as soon as the rental is up to par. I moved in probably a month after she said that I could have the unit. Upon moving in, I had a strange but comforting feeling. I started out with nothing but a box of toys and a nice blow-up mattress for myself and my almost 2-year-old son to share. It was a 2-bedroom apartment, 1 bathroom, and lots of closet space. Eventually, we made it home. But one day, my son was in the spare bedroom, what was going to be his room, and started laughing, a hearty baby laugh that takes work to muster from any baby really. I walk in and he's staring at a corner and acts as though he doesn't even see me in there. Then suddenly, he stops. Anyone with a child knows this is a little odd. The child would normally look to the source of entertainment, but for my son, just stopped and toddled toward me, as if told to do so. It seemed odd, but I dismissed it. Fast forward a few months, we've got our own beds, although I let him sleep in mine, and I awake one night to him belly laughing once again. Full-on giggles in the darkness. Nothing but the moonlight through the sheer curtains bouncing over my face onto his, since I'm the one facing the window, and he's looking over my shoulder into the darkness. A big smile is spread over his face as I say, "What's so funny, my honey?" He says, "The man," as he's still gazing over my shoulder. But then, his smile gets scared and serious, and he puts his tiny finger over his lips, and as though he's mimicking someone, he says, "Shh, no mama, no man, go night-night." Needless to say, I did not go night-night for that night. Days and weeks passed when small incidents happened where he'd be laughing or talking about his friend. I started not worrying about it because, to me, it was not that big of a deal. He stopped being creepy at night. One day, though, he was in what was supposed to be his room just cracking up laughing once again. When he came into the living room, I asked him, "What's so funny in there, bud?" And he replied, "The man, he's funny. He tells me jokes. He's not a monster, he tells me jokes. He's nice, mama." I was like, okay. He's got an imaginary friend. Wonderful. Whatever. This goes on another week or two until one day he's in his room, having a full conversation. I don't recall what. I just remember hearing him chatting in there as if having an actual conversation, and him repeating a word I knew he didn't know. Too big for an almost 2-year-old's vocabulary. He comes into the living room and I ask again, "Who are you talking to in there?" He says, "The man, mama." I knew I shouldn't ask, but I did, and I said, "What's the man look like?" And he replies, "Bumpy. He's bumpy, Mom. Looks like a monster, but not a monster, Mom. He's nice. He tells jokes, he's nice." I'm sitting there like, okay, cool. This is totally an imaginary friend. All is fine, and that was that. A few days later, I wake up suddenly to a fight in the hallway. My next-door neighbor had come home drunk and was banging on her apartment door like a complete psycho. I had grown up rather comfortable in a town where, literally, locking your doors was optional, so for once, I went to the door to lock it so this woman wouldn't accidentally open my door, and it was already locked. The door handle, the deadbolt, and the chain lock. I had never locked the deadbolt, let alone the chain lock. I was confused but wrote it off as me being a tired mom. The next morning, bright and early, my son wakes me up to, "Mama, the man saves us. He locked the door from the bad lady, Mama." Again I read it off as he heard the commotion the night before and credited his imaginary friend for my actions. Later that day, I had just gotten a carload of groceries, and I took the first few bags in and up the stairs, and I get a movie in for my son to occupy him while I go get the rest inside. I go out on maybe what is the 3rd or 4th trip, and my neighbor catches me. She's my age. I hadn't met her before, but she seems kind. She approaches me and introduces herself and asks, "Maybe this isn't appropriate, but how much did you pay for that apartment?" I didn't exactly know the rules to how units were priced, or what have you, so I just vaguely asked why, and she said, "Well, did they tell you what happened there?" And I was like, "No, she said she was waiting on some girls to move out that were going to Florida, but..." I trailed off. She says, "No, there was a dad and a son who lived in there. They both had like genetic disease where you get bumps or polyps all over the skin. The son killed himself in the spare bedroom by overdosing. Nobody knew for days. They had all sorts of cleaning crews in there. It's a shame too, because he'd always tell my kids jokes and say, 'See, I tell jokes, I'm not a monster.' He was so sweet to my boys. He was so worried about scaring them. He'd always tell them jokes." So this is another one of my experiences from working as an overnight security guard at the local port. This did not happen to me firsthand since it happened to one of my coworkers, but since that incident happened during my shift, I would fear to even go use the restroom alone. So just to recap on the setting, the local port has a radius of nearly 2 miles, and there are 3 overnight security guards on the shift, including me. We were all at the front gate post, and it's about the size of a trailer home. The front gate post is separated from everything else in the site: buildings, slabs, offices, the oil rigs, everything. It's the entry point to the entire industrial park. The offices and restrooms are about walking distance from our post, and it's really dark since there wasn't really any illumination around. Around 2 a.m. the lieutenant walked out of the post to go use the restroom. The restrooms are deep in the center of the offices. The offices carry a very creepy vibe because they were constructed around the 1950s, so the wooden floorboards and walls were like the style there. About 7 minutes later, me and Mike look out of the post window to find our lieutenant sprinting back to the post. At first we thought it was hilarious since he's a chubby dude, so we found it funny watching him run. Then a realization started to kick in. The lieutenant was the one who let out the fact that this site was haunted. He said that he's seen things, and that it didn't really startle him that much anymore. We slowly began to imagine and wonder what the heck could have scared him so much. I mean, it must have been bad enough for him to be running back in a very hysterical manner. The lieutenant opens the door to the post that me and Mike are in, and we are both speechless and just staring at him while he catches his breath. After catching his breath, he tells us, "This is the last time I will ever use those restrooms in the office building. I was taking a crap in the 3rd stall, and then I heard the door swivel open. I thought it was one of you, so I simply ignored it. But the thing is, I didn't hear any footsteps. I was listening to music, but I paused it to see if I could hear anything. A few seconds went by and nothing, and then I heard the water faucet go off by itself. Then a few seconds later, the air dryer also went off. I finished my business and ran back as fast as I could because I knew it wasn't either of you in there." The creepier part about this is that both the water faucet and the hand dryer are both motion activated, so in order for them to have gone off, something must have triggered it. Before this incident, I was already skeptical about using the restroom alone. I hated going to the bathroom during my night shift because I was always anticipating something creepy like this to happen to me. The worst part is, when you're in there doing your business, you're in a vulnerable position. Also, those restrooms are way too deep in the building, and it's pitch black inside. You would need a flashlight to go inside, and it's really quiet and creepy.